Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to what is the show? Oh, yeah, it's all about English. Oh, well, last week I gave a little teaser and said my younger brother was going to be on as a guest for today's show. And, well, so far he's late, but looks like he's just about to chime in. Chime in. All right. I will invite him in when he's ready. Brandon, let me know when you're ready. And okay, so when he's ready, but in the meantime, I don't want to waste too much time because this could go into a long conversation, or it could just be a really quick hello. Oh, hello. Excuse me. If you are in the chat, please introduce yourself. Say hello. How are you? And all of those nice things. And let's get into this. So today the topic is how to ask questions. How to ask questions that you might be afraid to ask. If you have ever been in a situation where you had a burning question, but you were just too nervous to ask, maybe. Oh, there he is. There's my brother Brandon. Hold on, I'll introduce you in a second. uh, Maybe you were too nervous to ask. Maybe you were in a business meeting. You wanted to clarify something, or perhaps at a networking event, you wanted to get to know someone better or break the ice and meet someone. Asking questions is essential to making any situation better. All right, we got some people in the chat. Welcome. Nice to see you guys. So that's what we're going to talk about, because I know that fear can actually hold people back. That's why on All About English today, we are going to discuss some strategies for asking questions fearlessly. And it's specifically tailored for my English learners and professionals who might have worries about how to deal with this stuff. Okay. And you are especially lucky to get with us today, Brandon Wilborn. He is my brother. He's a professional writer. He's an editor with years of experience helping people communicate more effectively. And he's going to share some of his expertise on the topic and provide valuable insights to how we ask questions with confidence, not only to get to know people, but as a writer, how to get to know characters and stuff when you're writing. So we'll get into some of those questions as we move along. All right. Don't forget, when we start getting into this stuff, be sure to stick around to the very end of the show, because we will have a bonus tip for you. It's a very special bonus tip. So let's just get started. Okay. So we're going to go over three main points, and then the bonus. We're going to talk about breaking the ice, getting to know someone, asking for clarification if you're in a meeting or a situation where you just need more information, and that bonus. All right. Let's start off by introducing my younger brother. There's a great picture. And his name is Brandon M. Wilborn. He is an author, as I said, an editor, a copywriter, and my brother. So, Brandon Wilborn, introduce yourself if you could. I know you can't really follow that. So,
introduce myself. Well, you forgot, father, husband. But those are important to me, not as much to you.
Well, I know they are pretty important to me too, because those are my nephews and niece and nephew that you got over there.
So. That is true, and the best sister-in-law you've ever had,
and the best sister-in-law I ever had. Only sister-in-law I ever had too.
Yeah, she had. I think she's still in the room. So.
Okay. Well, it's early over there. What time is it?
It is 8 o'clock.
8 o'clock.
So
my goodness.
We have an extra dog in the house, and it's 8 o'clock in the morning. So on Saturday.
Oh my gosh.
Can you hear me okay? We didn't get to do a test beforehand because I was trying an alternative setup in the other room, and it would not plug and play would not play. So.
Oh, I hate when that happens. All right. Well, I can hear you just fine. If anybody else have any problems, leave a comment down there. We got Bonnie. Hey, Bonnie. Nice to see you. Young, and you made it on time today. Awesome to see. Excuse me is here. And now you can see my brother. She says, hi, Brandon.
Hi.
Okay.
I can see the chat as well. Hi. I am in next door to Boise, Idaho.
Right next door.
Yeah, next town over, called Meridian.
Mm-hmm.
If you happen to ever come out this way, there is no Z in Boise.
There's no Z in Boise.
Yeah. Most people
even though we say Boise.
most people in the United States say Boise, but it's Boise because it's from the
Is
French.
that how it's pronounced?
Yeah.
Really?
There is no Z in Boise. So
you learn something new every day.
I'm not sure exactly what kind of introduction you're looking for. You already introduced me. I thought we were going to jump right into the content.
Well, that is a good point. Well, the reason why I wanted to have you on today's show specifically, I mean, I know you ask a lot of, you and I both come from this kind of background of asking questions a lot. I don't know. Dad was always saying, if you have a question, look it up. That's what I remember. So we got really good about looking things up. So we avoid saying things like, I don't know, because there's always an answer somewhere. You just have to know which questions to ask. So
I'm perfectly fine saying I don't know. In fact, I get I've had people tell me they're surprised to hear a man say, I don't know.
That's very funny, because my wife, your sister-in-law, says, I think I've said I don't know 3 times in the 6 years that we've been married, almost 6 years that we've been married.
Oh, okay.
And every time she says, oh my gosh, you said I don't know. Yeah, because I hate to say I don't know. I would rather say, let me find out for you.
Right.
Let me find out for you. So if you ever,
I don't know yet.
Pro tip, or I don't know yet, but I will find out for you. Yeah.
Yes.
Pro tip for everybody out there. So let's jump in with breaking the ice. Breaking the ice. Okay. Now, I personally, for those of you who don't know, I am a military brat. My brother, of course, also a military brat. Military brat means we grew up following our father around everywhere he had to go because he was in the Navy. And we had to move, what was it, every 2 or 3 years, right, Brendan?
Typically.
And that means we had to be very good at breaking the ice and meeting new people, because we were always moving to new places. And if you didn't make friends quickly, what happened?
What does it mean to break the ice?
Well, breaking the ice is cutting through that icy cold barrier that divides people, when they've never met before. You meet a complete stranger. People put these ice walls between each other, and that's what it's all about. So
even yes, that happens even when you speak the same language.
Yes, not literal ice, but yeah, and it does. It happens even when you speak the same language. So let me jump in.
If you come to the U.S. or if you're interacting with people in the U.S., a lot of times we have a meeting or a party. There is a small activity, almost like a game, in the beginning of the conversation, in the beginning of the meeting, called an icebreaker.
Right. Which we did talk about a couple of weeks ago. We talked specifically about meeting icebreakers. But today I wanted to talk a bit more about the kinds of icebreakers you would use to meet a person for the first time. So that there are the 2 kinds. There's the kind you mentioned there, the meeting one that we've talked about on this show in the past. But also, if you're meeting somebody for the first time, how do you start off? I mean, do you have any tips or pointers for how you would meet someone for the first time? I mean, I've got a few, but I'd love to hear what your thoughts are.
I feel like one of the best ways to break the ice is largely just to be an open and warm person at the time. I mean, you don't always have to be open and warm, but if you are trying to meet someone, going into that and saying, I'm going to smile, introduce myself well, and then show interest in something about that other person. So, hi, I'm Brandon. Absolutely. Yeah, I noticed this about you. Tell me more about that. Or what's your name would be obviously the first icebreaker question.
Well, no, that's a good point, though. When you are meeting someone for the first time, what you said. So let's break it down. The really brave route that Brandon is talking about, I call this the direct approach, is start with your name. Hi, I'm so and so. I'm Dennis. And then you want to bring some way to connect each other. Maybe you're at an event, you may at a conference or something, so you can start with a question about the conference. That's the real easy way. uh, Sometimes you might even start with a question before you even introduce yourself. That's kind of the less direct approach. So the direct approach is hand in your face. Hi, I'm Dennis. Nice to meet you. What's your name? That's a very simple question to ask versus what do you think of the conference so far? Or what do you think of this speaker? Or what do you think of the weather?
Where do we sign in?
Oh, good one. Where yeah, where do we sign in? What time is lunch?
What's the
um,
Wi-Fi password?
oh, that's a good one. Have you seen there's a funny meme video I saw. Someone said, "What's the Wi-Fi password?" And the coffee shop lady said, "Oh, you have to buy a cup of coffee first." And they said, "Oh, right." And so they bought the cup of coffee. And then she says, "Okay, what's the Wi-Fi password?" You have to buy a cup of coffee first. All one, all, all one letter, no spaces. I thought that was brilliant. If I ever had a coffee shop, that's what I would do. So yeah, one of the things that I want to point out, I'll just jump in with the tips here. What you said was notice
Mhm.
something about the other person.
Or
I
like you said
like
about the environment.
or about the environment. So notice where you're at. This means that you have to kind of pay attention to what's happening in your surroundings, in your environment, and actually notice things. I have used this on at airports, just striking up a conversation with the person next to you in the seat. If you see maybe a book that they're reading, oh, what do you think of that book? But my first tip is start with open-ended questions. Would you agree with that, Brandon?
I think that's a good way to get people to open up. If you ask a yes or no question, that might be all you get.
Exactly.
Hey,
Exactly.
or if you ask a more direct question like where is something? Do you know where there's a coffee shop? That's probably all you're going to get.
Hmm.
Open-ended questions invite more conversation and it kind of let someone know this person wants to talk.
Right. You want to have a deeper conversation. Yeah, definitely. I always try to say that's one of my general rules. If at all possible, try to use open-ended questions and avoid single answer. Some people call them closed-ended questions. I've started calling them single answer questions. Yes, no, or maybe uh, a very direct like, oh, you go that way and turn right. That's a single answer question. What time is lunch? 11:30. Those kind of questions are not really great for breaking the ice. Finding common ground, which is what you talked about, noticing something.
Hmm.
Um, I personally like the compliment routine. You ever use the compliment? Ooh, I like
You,
your shoes. Where'd you
that's
get them?
that. My son is 9 and he's been pulling that since he was about 3. So when he
Really?
was 3 years old, he would
Good
walk up to
job, Dave.
strangers and say, "I like your shirt," and it was always the same tone of voice. "I like your shirt," and it was always the shirt.
He's always
So
the shirt.
he learned how to compliment people very early.
And the compliment's very useful. It's a very great way to break the ice. I
It does.
like,
It does
um,
need to be your third point there, which is genuine. If you're
yeah.
going to offer
Hmm.
a compliment, it needs to come across as genuine. And occasionally, a compliment may backfire. So you have to figure out through experience where somebody may be, what might be a safe compliment. So complimenting a piece of clothing or piece of jewelry, asking about where they maybe got it, that sort of
Hmm.
thing is usually going to
Yeah.
go over well. But complimenting um, something that is
Well,
not,
yeah. You might.
you
Mm.
can get in trouble.
Yeah,
as
you can
as
get
a
in
very
trouble.
young man, I learned very early not to say, "Oh, when is the baby due?" unless you know for certain that there's a baby due.
Yeah, that's something that we definitely want to be careful. When is the baby due? Wow, it's a really good question. But if you could be making a mistake, could be just a could be just a beer belly. Oh, so yeah, that's my first tip. Break the ice. Remember that the best way to do it is with questions, if you ask me, and don't be afraid of making those little mistakes. Like, hey, we all
Hmm.
do it. Okay,
Yeah,
sometimes you make a little mistake, but if you are genuinely interested in another person, you're going to do great.
right.
All right,
And I would say this: it takes just a tiny bit of courage to go speak to a stranger. Sometimes our
tiny bit. Yeah,
kids go
some people takes a
to
lot.
our kids do some martial arts, and whenever there's new students in the class, the sensei will say, um, before you start practicing with someone, you need to introduce yourselves. And he'll tell the kids who are 5 to 15, you're going to be meeting people your entire life. You might as well just get it over with and learn their name.
No, that's
For
that's good
kids,
advice,
that's
actually.
great.
Yeah, yeah. So as a writer, you're a writer. You kind of have to break the ice with your characters when you're writing characters all the time, right? So, what are some of the questions that you have to ask yourself as you are creating a character?
That's a really interesting question. I think
Thank you.
that it's less a breaking. I think that it's less a breaking the ice question because you are dealing with, for fiction. I write fiction mostly, and when you're dealing with fiction, you're creating characters. You're not creating them completely out of thin air. You have met people. Famous figures from history. You know people on TV. You kind of can compile different characteristics to put together somebody who's unique or somewhat unique, but still has a lot of common traits.
Hmm.
Um, and so those are very much more, I think, your next step,
So,
which is
yeah,
the getting to know you types of questions. Were you going to say something?
yeah, that's definitely. I was just going to say, well, so basically, I was going to lead in with getting to know someone is more like what you're going to do when you're writing new characters,
Right.
because you're not
Right. If you're
really
writing,
breaking the ice, so to speak. You're not saying like, I mean, because I would always imagine I've done a little bit of writing, but I sometimes will ask myself if I'm introducing a new character, I might ask myself, um, as if I was in that position. I don't do the same kind of writing and nor the level of writing that you do, but a long time ago when I tried my hand at it, those were the kinds of questions I would ask, like, who are you? What do you do? And
right.
but again, those are getting to know you questions, aren't they?
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
once you've broken the ice and you open the door with your initial question, what are some of the questions that you can ask to get to know someone better? And without, because here's the thing that I always get from people: I know how to say hello, I know how to say how are you, but usually after we're finished with that initial greeting, we kind of look at each other like twiddling our thumbs, and we don't know what to say. And so I think that's kind of where the reason why I wanted to get into this topic today. What
Right.
do you do to keep that conversation going?
I think that the one of the original ice breaking ideas of find something to notice about that person or about something going on, and then open up the topic,
Hmm.
and then you can start asking questions about that topic. So, for instance, if you are meeting someone and you notice something
Yeah.
about them, oh, hey, that's a really interesting watch you have. They might say it was a gift from someone.
Hmm.
And then if they're open already, they may be willing to just tell that story. But if they're not, then you can ask questions about the watch, or you can ask questions about that that event. What was it, a birthday present? Was it an anniversary present? Something like that. And
Yeah.
then that sometimes will prompt a story from them. And usually getting to know someone is hearing their stories.
Without a doubt, yeah. It's like it's hearing your story. So that is like that requires a certain level of listening that a lot of people may not be used to. So it requires you to be a very active listener. You really need to listen to what the other people are saying
Mhm.
and grab onto things that they're telling you.
Mhm.
Too often, I think many people are getting involved, or they're in a conversation and they're just waiting for the next thing, or they're too busy thinking of what they're going to say next.
Mhm.
And that's a great way to kill a conversation, because if you're just worried about what you're going to say, you're not showing real interest in what they're saying.
Right.
Right.
And I understand. I don't know
So
how much of that
where'd you
is
go?
an American mentality to be constantly thinking of the next thing. I don't know. I know there's other cultures where they may have a different attitude towards that,
Mm,
but I think part of human nature is I'm most important. So everybody to some degree has, I want to say something. I want to say something going through their mind as they are listening to someone. And so if you are listening and you can maybe find one thing that they've said and just tuck that away and say, I'm going to come back to that. And then you
yeah.
can continue listening.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, Memory is part of
And
it.
that, hmm yeah. No, you're absolutely right.
I
So
think, what was that?
no,
I
go
wanted to
ahead.
say
You're
something
about to
else,
say.
but I
I
forgot.
think.
We're both waiting.
Oh, eh,
So when you are doing that, when you are listening, um, what's interesting is that because everybody has something they want to say, when you listen, you're actually doing a lot of the relational work for them to feel comfortable with you because you're listening. If you're
yeah.
if you're if you're if you've got this thing and you're doing this, uh-huh. Yeah, uh-huh. Right.
Yeah.
Everyone knows you're not listening. But
Yeah. We can tell.
if you're looking, in a culturally appropriate area, towards the
Culturally
face, toward the
appropriate.
eyes or the mouth or off to the
Yeah.
side. I know different cultures have different places they might focus, but
Hmm.
you're paying attention and you are then able to um, respond back in a way that makes sense. People end up liking you more. And so, especially as we get to the next conversations later on of different, the bonus, I think, um,
Hmm.
it can open doors for you when you're listening to other people.
Without a doubt. Yeah. That's really exactly. We are going to get to that a little bit later on with the bonus bit. So when you're paying attention to the other person, be sure to pay attention to not just their words, but also their tone, their body language, because they can be telling you a lot with all of those things as well. Remember, I mentioned it a few weeks ago. Only about 7 or 8% of people's understanding of us is from our words alone. Body language and tone actually play a very large role in your conversations. Believe it or not, it's an oversized role. It's like 55 or 65% uh, is just body language alone. So yeah,
This is
what
it,
it's
you
true.
notice it as a parent
Hmm.
because many times if I'm tired and if my voice becomes very low and very, my kids think I'm upset with them or I'm
Mm,
disappointed with them because
hmm.
I have a low face and I'm talking like this and they think I'm upset. So this morning, for instance, the new dog that we're house sitting or watching for someone wakes me up early and the kids are already awake and they start asking me all these questions and I'm just, well, whatever you
Ugh,
want to do, it's
I know the feeling.
fine. But
I
they
know the
think,
feeling.
oh no, we're in trouble because we woke up early.
Oh, right, yeah. That's the God. That's kids. They're so sharp with that stuff. Yeah, but it's true. And that body language, that tone, you believe it or not, your body language will come through even on the telephone.
It will.
It will. So, I mean, use your body language even when you're talking on the phone. Stand up. I mean, I do everything standing up almost incessantly. I mean, even right now, I do all my classes and shows, everything standing up. So yeah, the point was listen actively, like we just said, ask open ended questions. That's something that we didn't mention, but it kind of goes without saying. You really want to ask open ended questions every time you're talking to someone. The only time I think a closed ended or single answer question is when you need to know a direct answer right now. Where's the bathroom? It's over there. Um, if you're in sales, you could say, you've got to finally ask that closed ended question. So, are you ready to buy now? You've got to ask for the sale at the end. Uh, what about be respectful? What are your thoughts on being respectful? Obviously, you already mentioned culturally looking in someone's face.
Right.
Looking at your phone is not being respectful,
I think
right?
that might be one of the most prolific worldwide cultural norms is looking at
Oh
your
yeah.
phone is rude.
Oh
Um,
wow.
being respectful, I usually, and maybe you've covered the idea of a handshake in American culture.
Actually, I don't think I have.
Okay. So in general, I, and I think it's something that a lot of people might do naturally to some degree, but you can make it a purposeful thing, is to reciprocate and kind of
Meaning,
meet somebody in the middle with the
oh, as
level
in,
of American culture is very casual, right?
mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
so if somebody is being more formal than might be expected in American culture, then I would reciprocate and meet them in the middle. If they're being significantly less formal, uh, then then there might be an altercation coming. Because if
Yeah,
they're being
might
too
get ready to fight.
not necessarily a fight, but if they're being way too informal and being crude or crass or something like that, I might ask them politely, would you please change your tone or change your
Right.
level of speech? There are children
Mhm.
present. Um,
Yeah.
that's not a common
The
thing, but
children.
it happens.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, uh, in general, you meet somebody where they're at. You meet somebody kind of in the middle where you mirror them essentially.
Yeah.
And this is another thing from a human perspective is if someone is doing particular gestures, if they're doing this or
Yes.
doing this,
Yes.
if you mirror similar gestures to them, not they do it and then you immediately copy them, but if they kind of rub their chin and then at some point you do the same, there's a part of our brain that sees that as non-threatening
Mm-hmm.
and
It,
and
it.
and
Yeah.
also almost like almost like you are subconsciously telling them, I am respecting and admiring you in some way. uh, if you really
No,
want to
that's
go
that.
deep on that,
Yeah, absolutely right.
try to match breathing with them.
Okay, now we're just getting into the wow, it's
No,
craziness
like
now.
it just it's a it
Match
you're
breathing.
people will pick up on it, and if you really want to connect with somebody, if
Mm-hmm.
you match their rate of breathing, then that means you're likely speaking at the same tone and you're likely speaking
Mm-hmm.
in the same energy,
Yeah.
and they pick up on it subconsciously in ways that makes people very comfortable.
Without a doubt. Yeah. I mean, you can see it when you meet a person for the first time. So, uh, how they react to you is kind of where you should meet them.
Hmm.
And you, I've heard it said similarly. You want to speak to the audience that you're in front of. So if your
Right.
audience is if it's just an audience of one or two people, obviously you're going to bring it down a little bit
Hmm.
if that's their general zone of operate, if that's how they are operating. But if you're talking to someone who's already very flamboyant, maybe they move their hands a lot, then bring the energy up and kind of
Right.
match them. Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And that makes
So
them more
that's a
comfortable and
way of
makes them
making.
feel like you appreciate them.
Yeah, it's a form of being respectful. It's a form of building rapport and connection.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I know that you talked earlier about different cultures having different kinds of rules. This this particular trick can be used in many different cultures. But I've been here in Korea for a long time. Generally, everyone's looking down a lot. But
Mhm.
if you're speaking English with a native speaker, most native English speaking countries always look each other in the eye,
Mhm.
and meet at that level. And if you're one of my students, or you've worked with me in the past, or you've seen one of my videos, remember the triple A rule for keeping a conversation going. Number one, answer questions, add more information. That's A number two. And number three, ask similar types of questions. You're going to keep those conversations going and build on. We basically broke it down for the last, I don't know, 15 minutes there.
That sounds
All
good.
right. Now,
Are there any? I mean,
yeah, no,
we're happy to
nobody's
look at
been asking
the chat
questions.
or questions.
Nobody's
Maybe
asking questions.
I have a habit of speaking fast, so I'm trying to slow myself down.
Mm, that is no, you're doing okay. I think you're fine. But okay. But then again, nobody is asking questions. So, but we do still have a lot of folks on. So the next thing I wanted to ask you was, because we mentioned the writing exercise, what's your favorite character? What was your favorite character to write and meet, quote unquote, and get to know?
Um,
Do you
those are
do you have a favorite?
those are different. Right, meeting and getting to know are different things.
Oh, okay. Let me dive deeper then. What of all the characters you've written? Um, Obviously, I've read a lot of your stuff. You There are some characters. I mean, but maybe you have a favorite. I don't know. Do you have any particular favorites of maybe your most recent novel?
Sure. As far as meeting goes, there was one that completely surprised me, which was fun. I thought the main characters were coming to a cabin that was going to be a safe place for them to hide out for a little while, and I thought someone was going to open the door, but when the door opened, it was a different person. Just the imagination kicked that in there when I wasn't expecting it, and I was surprised when I wrote it, and I said, "Who the heck is this person?"
That's not who I thought of. Wow.
And
So
he has been a fun character because I didn't plan him from the beginning, but it's been fun. It was fun to meet him. That was Gideon. He's a
yeah,
tall, burly guy who lives in the woods and traps things and sets
oddly enough, that
a lot
one
of
of my
traps.
favorite. What he was one of my favorite characters from your first novel. Yeah, he was.
Right.
I didn't know that he was an accidental meeting in your imagination. What a
He
cool.
was. He
That's a
was.
cool story.
I've had that moment writing the latest book, but it wasn't specifically a character.
Hmm.
As far as getting to know, one of the main villains has been more interesting to get to know because he is very unlike me, and his motivations uh, run deeper than I can pull out from a lot of other characters. So when you're talking about getting to know characters, you start off asking questions you might ask somebody that you're just getting to know. You know, where are you
Hmm.
from? How old are you? What do you do for a living? Things like that. And this character
Hmm.
starts to tell you things. And then as you go to learn more and more about the character and what really makes them tick, you would go into deeper questions. And you might, I mean, it's almost like a psychology session for an imaginary person. So you would ask them more probing questions as you went. So you might just go for a walk and in your imagination interview this person to say, hey,
Hmm.
where are you from? How old are you? You know, what's your favorite food? You know, who's your best friend? What are they like? You know, um, what's one of the things that you have struggled with in the past year? What were your parents like? How did they treat you? What's your biggest wound in your life? So the
Ooh,
things you might ask when you're considering marrying somebody become the questions you ask all of these characters so that you really get to know them. But then you write it all
wow.
down to
Mhm.
reference later.
Well, see, now I got two things to say. Number one, that's a really awesome uh, way to get to know a character. It's also a grill. You mentioned you go for a walk and you have this interview in your head. I want to I mean, I'm always telling people if you want to get better at remembering and get better at speaking English, have conversations. Even us native speakers do it. Have conversations in your head. You can even move your lips. You put the little earbud in your ear, and then if people see you talking, you could just say you're on the phone. You know,
Yeah.
that's a really good trick for improving your thinking in English. But but
Yeah.
also preparing for conversations in advance. Just practice asking questions.
Use this little
What is that?
recorder as
Oh,
well.
cool.
It's just a little mini recorder, and it plugs into my computer where I can either uh, just save it or I can
Hmm.
actually transcribe with different software. And so
Awesome.
that helps me to keep track of things as well.
That is very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
All
So
right.
when you're walking, just be like this. Then
Yeah, just talk.
you don't look so strange. You look like you're a reporter now.
Yeah, I'm a reporter. I'm reporting on imaginary people. All right. Now the last one before we get to the bonus, and I don't because I don't want to take up too many people
Right, right.
too much time.
We should keep
Um,
going.
but let's talk about the kind of questions you need when you're seeking clarification. Now, I in a meeting type of situation um, or even in a one-on-one situation, there are going to be times when you don't know what somebody's talking about.
Hmm.
You don't know. You might not understand everything in the meeting. I think someone asked me that a week or two ago. When you're in a meeting, what do you say for what do you say if you know the answer but you don't know how to say it in English? How do you get it clarified to be able to say it in English?
Hmm.
And what I said was, if you can't think of how to say it in English, maybe because you don't know the right words for it or something like that. What I said was start by asking questions. You can say, like, can you tell me more about that? What do you mean by that? It'll help get more information from them to you, and thereby you'll just be building your vocabulary and be able to answer that question more easily.
Hmm.
Um, you know, that's kind of the way I look at it. Um, so what do you do when you're confused about something and you just don't know? I mean, what's your general rule of thumb? You said you don't have a problem saying I don't know, but what if you're in a situation? I do. What if you're in a situation where you kind of need to get more information?
I, I keep going back to my kids because in many ways they are learning English. More than once, they ask me. What's interesting is they'll ask me what a word means when they've been using it for a while,
Hmm.
and so I keep going back to they'll say something and I don't understand what they're getting at or what they mean, especially when they're really young. And you have to ask them, can you say that in a different way? Or can you explain a little bit more what you mean?
Hmm.
But I mean, this happens with people, adults who say something and I don't understand the reference point or I don't understand what they're talking about. And so you just ask. The journalism questions are really helpful.
Now,
Who?
what are the journalism questions?
It's they call it the W's.
The
Who,
W, the W's.
what, when, where, and why, and then they throw in how.
Yeah. The
So
WH questions.
yes, the WH questions.
Hmm.
So, who are we talking about? What are we talking about? What does this mean? Uh, when is this happening? Why is this happening? Or why are we talking about this? Who, what, when, where, why? Wait, who, when, where, and how would be.
And how?
How does this
How did
work?
this happen? How did
How did
this
this
work? Yeah.
happen?
Hmm.
How can we improve? How can we change the course that we're on? Things like that. Always also the same questions you would want to answer if you're ever making an invitation for an event,
Yeah, that's
because
true.
who,
Mhm.
what, when, where, and why you're going to the same
So take
as.
notes by that one. That those are all very good points. I mean, I used to, well, if ever I have questions like in a meeting or something like that, I would put those questions down. Who does this affect?
Mm,
What what things do we need to make this thing happen? Um, when is this expected to be finished, or when is this project going to start, or something like that?
mhm.
Those kinds of questions: who, what, when, where. Where do we put the people, or where do we put the materials for this, and why? I love the question why. My kids love the question why. All the time I get why.
Hmm.
Why this, why that. So always ask why something is that will keep you busy for ages.
Or why that's important.
Um, or why that's important. Yeah, absolutely. Now I got a question from Mona here. I just before we go on to the next thing, how do you keep the conversation flowing? And can you guys share the tips to avoiding awkward moments in between? Hmm. What are your thoughts on that, Brad?
I think flow in conversation is important. And I also think that there are times when pauses are okay. And people need time to think. We think if we're going to complain about people thinking to themselves, "What am I going to say next? What am I going to say next?" Then we need to give space in the conversation for people to think about the answer. And
Hmm.
that can sometimes be very uncomfortable, especially. And I'm a teacher as well. I'm teaching a different context with our church and such, but asking a question and then being comfortable letting people think through the answer while I shut my mouth is a really important time for them to process what I've asked and what I've said, and then come up with their own thought rather than what does he want me to say.
That's a really good point. That point about what does he want, worrying about what he wants you to say or she wants you to say.
Mhm.
Don't or trying to fill up the silence with noise. Absolutely. I mean,
Right.
this is where I get into that. This is kind of where I go with the AAA stuff, the AAA rule. Adding more information when you answer a question allows, for one, it allows you to talk to someone who might have asked you a closed-ended question. They may have asked you a yes or no question. But if you want to keep the conversation going, you need to add more information. Add more, you know. If someone says, "Did you like your lunch?" It's a yes or no question, right? So you can answer yes or no, but then add more, explain what you liked about it, why you liked it, and things like that. And then ask a similar question of them, but make sure that your question is, what did you think about your lunch? And use their answers to draw more information from
Mhm.
them so you can then build on those questions and things like that. And try not to change the subject too early, unless
we
it's a
we
really
call that
awkward subject.
we call that emotional or conversational whiplash in my family.
Yeah. Yeah. Wait, what were we talking about? No. So yeah, that's good advice, bro. That's really good advice. So thank you for the question, Mona. I hope we answered that for you. Let us know if you need more. So when you're asking for clarification, we again, here we go with the asking open-ended questions again. But another thing you want to do is repeat the information
Hmm.
Okay. That's a really good trick to make sure that you understand, make sure that they know you understand what they're saying, or um, it shows that you're listening, maybe not understanding.
Right.
So for you might say, okay, so if I'm understanding this correctly, you're saying that XYZ. And that way they can make sure they can give you the confirmation of that. Yes, that is exactly what I'm saying. That's a very useful way of doing that. And then, of
Right.
course, avoid leading questions. Okay, you may have heard of a leading question. That's a question that is kind of like from a legal perspective. Leading questions are questions that suggest a certain answer. Okay, so that's like when you're leading the way. These can be problematic. They can when you're seeking clarification because they might unintentionally influence the person's answer and their so try to focus on neutral questions and things like that. Um, and what do you think about that? Avoiding leading questions, Brandon. Can you give an example of a leading question?
If you, I find it helpful to go to the extreme or to the silly example to
Mm-hmm.
say something like, you know, what's your favorite food and why is it bananas? You go to the extreme and you start to see, oh, it's kind of
Yeah,
you've excluded all the options that aren't bananas.
yeah, exactly. What's your favorite food and why is it bananas? So tell me, what do you like about bananas? No, no, that's a very good point.
Sometimes that might be appropriate. If you're at a banana
Mm-hmm.
conference, you might want to know what does this person think about
Though
bananas?
you're absolutely right. It could be, maybe you're at the grocery store and you're using that as a pickup line to the attractive person next to you. Hey, you like bananas, do you? Maybe that's not a good idea. Now that I've
Yeah.
said it, I wish I hadn't. Uh, okay. All right. Let me.
And this is
Excuse
why
me.
we're brothers.
That's why we're brothers.
So
Okay,
leading
we've got another.
questions.
What if the other person gives you a short answer? Excuse me. What if the other person gives you a short answer? Yeah, well, they probably don't. They're probably not interested in talking to you, or
Yeah.
they're not. I shouldn't say it. No, that's not entirely. It could be that if they gave you a short answer, they're probably not interested in the topic that you started by the question that you asked. So you try to find another avenue, and if they just keep giving you short answers, when maybe they just don't want to be friends, don't want to talk to you. What do you think?
I
What?
do,
There are
I
people who
do.
don't
There
want
are
to make
there are
friends.
people who are distracted. Airplanes are a great example where somebody will give
Hmm.
you a short answer, and if you keep asking questions, they'll give you another short answer because they want to sit and watch the movie on their phone.
Right. Right.
They don't want to engage. There are
Hmm.
also people who may be struggling with conversation in the same way, and they don't necessarily know how to answer,
Hmm.
and they're afraid of looking like they don't know. So
Right.
you can continue to ask open-ended questions that are maybe um, a little bit from a different angle,
Yeah.
and ask, could you tell me more about that, or change to something that's a different topic but close. So if you're
Right.
talking about finances in business world, maybe you bring up a different topic in the financial world rather than the markets. Maybe you talk about uh, real estate.
That's a good point.
And
She says he or she says then just walk away. If they don't
politely,
engage at all, if they don't engage with you at all, then yeah. But I mean, if you're stuck on an airplane uh, for 4 or 5 hours uh, or longer, eh, you might be stuck with them. Or you know,
you
so
can
it's up to
politely
you to
excuse
try to
yourself.
find ways. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So all right, let's jump into this because we're almost at an hour. Let's jump into the bonus section here, and
Okay.
we're going to talk about. Looks like I'm getting a bad internet connection. Must be this hour. All right, bonus: how to talk to someone with a higher social status. Higher social status. Now, I hate to use the term social status, but this could be, and we're not just talking about movie stars or rich people and things like that. This is more, although it could be, this is mostly about using questions to get to know someone who is at a quote unquote higher level than you. Maybe you have to talk to the CEO or vice president of your company. That's a higher social status. Um, that's the kind of person. So how what tips do you have, Brandon, for talking to people of higher social status? And do you have any other examples of people who might be a higher level, higher social status?
Uh, do I have any examples of people? That's
Well,
in which
social
types of
status is different in different cultures. Like
right.
Korea is very clear when
Hmm.
someone's at a certain level. There's no question. It could be, and it's very clear in the language as well. I mean,
Hmm.
they have entirely different levels of politeness that you're
Right.
supposed to use, even if a person is only a year older than you. They're technically a higher status. So, um, but in the US and in the UK, we don't deal quite the same way as social status as that. Like I
Right.
could go,
Right.
it's like that old, what's that old joke that Ronald Reagan told? Something like, uh, you know, the Russian guy, Soviet guy, and an American guy are bragging about their countries. They're both in the airport or something, and the American guy says, I live in the best country in the world. I can. It's totally free in America. I can go in. I could walk into the president's house if I wanted to. I could walk in there and I could put my finger on his desk and say, "Mr. President, I don't think you're a good president," or something like that. I think you're the worst president ever. And the Soviet guy says, I could do the same thing. I could walk into my president's house. I could walk up to his desk and I could say, Mr. President, I don't think the American president is a very good guy. So, anyway, so talking about a higher social status. Anyway, so how do you talk to someone who is at a higher level than you socially?
Again, I it takes a little bit for me of it, because of American context. It takes a little bit of getting out of my own perspective,
Mm-hmm.
because naturally I notice if someone is higher status, and if there is somebody, for instance, somebody who is at a conference and they are well known, they're maybe one of the speakers. All of the signals are telling you they are the expert and you are down here. And so you do need to get out of your own perspective at some times to think they didn't start off as the expert.
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
and they also didn't. um, they're here in this case in order to be a help and be a resource for people who are lower down. So you can be
Mm-hmm.
respectful for certain. You can do the mirroring things we've talked about before.
Yeah.
I think what is essential when you're maybe talking to them, if you're depends on what your goal is. If you just want to meet them and take a picture, if it's somebody who's well known, they're probably used to that sort of behavior. If
Mm-hmm.
it is somebody where you actually want to find out something or engage in a unique way, then that's where the interesting question would come into play. So if you know something about them, find a way to ask a question that is not what they would normally hear.
Well, that's good advice.
So the
Yeah.
question you're thinking of originally about how they got started or what they're working on right now, which they may have been talking about, take that question and go either further out or deeper in the meaning levels. And
Mm-hmm.
rather than asking, you know, how do I do this? Ask them, what was your biggest challenge with that, and how did you overcome it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good. What's your biggest challenge and how did you overcome it? Well, it's kind of like the question I asked you about how do you come up with your characters, how to interview your
Right.
characters. The, I I love the fact that you may not have been asked a question like quite like that before, which is the reason why I asked those questions as kind of a precursor to this bonus section. So you can use this not just for meeting famous people, but if you're going to go into like a job interview,
Hmm.
you're going to be dealing with someone who is a higher social level than you because they're the ones who can give you a job. So,
Yes.
right? So you hit the first one about being respectful. The second point, doing your research, know a little bit of about that other person so that you're able to formulate those questions in advance uh, and use that information to prepare. That's the third point. Be prepared and be mindful. That way you can do your research in advance.
Mhm.
I also said be mindful of time because, hey, they probably have a lot of, uh, they're probably busy people. If it's a CEO of a company or something like that, and uh, just be mindful of the fact that they have a lot of time. So you're not going to have a whole lot of questions that you can ask. So get to the most important ones. If you're in an interview, instead of saying, um, how can I, imp-, instead of saying like, what can this company do for me, or what can I do for this, uh, or what I don't know, I lost my train of thought. Instead of asking the typical questions almost every person asks during an interview, because almost every interview guide tells you you should have a question. Uh, think about, like you said, go a little bit deeper in your research and ask a question that's not just that surface level
Right.
question, right?
For instance, if you're in an interview and you know a little bit about the company, everybody's going to go to the website and see what the
Hmm.
company does and maybe what their mission statement is. And you might ask questions, you might expect questions about, you know, can you explain the mission statement, or does that actually work here? Or why do you like working here? Is a common suggested question. But if you go to their website and you see the mission statement, and or maybe you see they won an award, you might ask a deeper question like, how did your mission statement help you win that award? Or was there
Hmm.
something about the culture that is different here that helped you win that award? Um, and
Hmm.
so go into things that are
Yeah,
more
yeah,
important
that's a
to
very good
them.
example.
That's
Hmm.
what I think. If you think about being respectful, then maybe it's not on here, but if you're thinking about how you can be of value and benefit to them as a person of higher social status, they're going to be more open to seeing what value you have. But if you're just thinking
Hmm.
about, I need this job, how can
Hmm.
I get this, how can I do this, you're going to be focused so much on yourself that you're not going to be looking at how you can be of service, and that they're people too.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. That the part about being courageous there at the end, be courageous. You know, I I wanted to say be courageous, but I forgot to type in the other part of that, which was make sure that you're not over exaggerating their level of notoriety or their level of status in your own mind. Okay, like you just said, Brandon, that was perfectly said. You're human and they're human. They're human beings. Everybody puts their pants on one leg at a time, as far as I know. Um, and that's really the main thing is that make sure that you understand that they're human. They're not some kind of higher level person. We have one question that is very interesting, and what if the question is, what should you not say or talk to or what should you not say to a person with higher social status? Well, personally, I say, this is Mandy, by the way. Mandy, I thank you for coming in as usual. Uh, I would say the most important thing to not say is, um, I would not get too personal about things like their, uh, you know, well, just anything personal, unless it's a very casual meeting.
Mhm.
I would try not to get too personal. But if it's a business setting, or even just meeting someone on the street, or in a social event, yeah, I'm sure not getting very personal
Yep.
is would be a bad idea. Be humble. Yes, thank you very much. Excuse me.
I I think we can think about being personal in different spheres.
Hmm.
And so, for instance, if you know this is a business meeting and you know that this person through their business, focus on that sphere, and you may get personal in that sphere of like, hey, what are your challenges with this right now, and how are you planning on overcoming them? Is a relatively personal question, but it's within the sphere they're expecting. If you talk to that person and say, man, how's your wife? Or how's your
Yeah, oh, yeah, yeah. That's a good point.
that may be a very different experience.
Hmm.
So, and I think the other thing to not potentially talk about, unless they bring it up, would be too much about your personal
Oh, yeah, yeah.
experience
Definitely don't
that's
talk. Yeah,
outside of
exactly.
that sphere.
Hmm. Hmm.
If it's still
Yeah.
in the same, so still in the same realm of conversation, I think that might
Hmm.
work.
So, all right, this is a good one. Bonnie says, should we talk more tactically? Tactically. I think that is a great question, except I'm not sure what that means until, wait, she just got a tactfully. Um, okay, that's good. Thank you for clarifying that, Bonnie. Should should you talk more tactfully? Um, that's a good question. Tact is basically the ability to speak in as uninsulting a way as possible. I think it's being polite is what tact is. So, of course, I think in a as much as possible, you. Uh oh, where'd I go?
You
Any
got
thoughts on
stuck
that,
in the
Brandon?
internet land. I think that much of
Yeah.
what we've been talking about is the art of being tactful.
Hmm.
Being aggressive is not very tactful. Being too direct in almost any circumstance is is going to lead to people putting their barriers up. However,
And then you have to
again, this
break the
is
ice again.
then you have to break the ice again. But I think
Mhm.
that there are times when, uh, if you have good rapport with someone, and maybe the conversation just keeps going, and you're maybe you're talking in circles, that is
Mhm.
where being direct and maybe being a little bit less tactful, but just getting to the point would would break that circle talk and make it, oh, we all can agree we're on the same page. Um, I've been in a really good example being in a meeting with 6 or 7 other people, and it was a really tough decision we all needed to make, and everybody was sharing, but nobody was really getting at what decision should we get to. Everybody was sharing their own thoughts, but nobody was willing to come down and just say, okay, which direction are we going to go? And so it
Mhm.
took someone in the room who wasn't necessarily the highest responsibility person or the highest status person from that perspective, but one of the older and wiser people to come and say, okay, we've all shared what we think, but none of us have actually shared what decision we think we should make. And so,
Mhm.
here's what I think would be a wise choice. What do you all think about that? And that was what got us finally on board after hours of talking in circles.
So sometimes you absolutely need that person who's going to just be direct and um,
But the rapport is important in that.
ask the question, the closer. Yeah. Well, it looks like we have reached the witching hour, and my internet is deciding to die out on me. It's weird. I don't know why. I did a little research, and for some reason, around this time, the internet starts to get wonky. So I don't
Okay.
know why.
All right.
It's very weird. Yeah. So
Anything else
I
we
want to
need to
say, and
wrap up
we're
with here?
also an hour and 5 minutes. So
Well,
first,
if
Brandon,
you
I want to
talk for
know.
half an hour,
I
it's
know
only expected that I would too.
that's true. That's true. Let the folks on here know where they can find you on if you got social media, if you got a website, and we'll put that in the comments as well.
Sure. My website is brandonwilborn.com. It is currently being rebuilt, so it may look a
Okay.
mess for a while. Um, I am off of social media currently,
Oh, good.
so
I guess.
I do not engage there. I am about to start a podcast where I read my books myself in short sections, and so that may be if you enjoy fantasy fiction. That may be of interest, but that'll be on the website. And I think there's a link there where you can get onto my email list.
Okay, so that's brandonwilborn.com. What's the name of your book? Well, I know the name of your book is The Treasure. Well, I don't know how you want to market it. It's The Treasure of Capric, but it's also a series.
It is
So,
yes, it is a series. The only one, well, there's two books currently available. One is a this is actually my editing copy here, so it does not for resale there. But there's the book, The Treasure of Capric,
uh-huh.
and
It's a good, fun book.
it's
Great way to practice your English.
it's nice and thick for a fantasy book. But there's a shorter follow up that is not a full sequel. It's just kind of a
Hmm.
short little adventure story attached.
Hmm.
Um, the
Really
second book
good if you have
is
got
on the
if you
way.
got kids, or
And
teenagers. I don't want to say
teenagers,
kids. Teenagers. Teenagers.
maybe 14
Yeah,
enough.
it's not for kids, but yeah, teenagers, 14 and up would be good. So I enjoyed it, and I'm not even 14. So, all right. Well, thank you very much. If you are interested in practicing your English with me, you can reach me at Amazing Talker. The link is in the description. And that's all the time we have for tonight. Thanks very much for everybody who you came to join us. Brandon, thank you for
Yes, thank you very
joining
much.
me. We got Bonnie says thank you for sharing, and everybody, thank you so much. We had some good comments and good interaction tonight. So
Yeah.
okay, and
Aloha.
on that, aloha, bye.
Bye.